I have no other questions. Any questions from the board?
Well, I think we'll start first with our professionals. Liz, do you want to start this time?
Sure. Okay, because the final site plan approval that you're seeking is for building A only right now, I wanna sort of focus on most of my questions on building A.
Yeah, Chuck, why don't you put up the, I think it was 812, is it? Or?
You want to put facade or floor plan?
A facade,
Oh,
yeah.
It looks like it's A11. Is the building there.
should be ready after that.
There we go.
So the first question I have, this is also something that has sort of come out of COVID, will the office windows be operable?
No.
No, why not?
So modern office buildings, there's no need to. It's energy efficient, they're airtight. The HVAC systems will be designed with an entirely new, modern, high-tech HVAC system. As you can see, they're much taller, and by putting these individual buttons in that are about 2-foot squares, it would be difficult to try to get handles and open these windows.
And are you gonna have sort of air purifying?
There'll be whatever the code dictates, but it's a new modern system that our MEP engineer has already had multiple conversations with the applicant about the type of system we're looking to move to redevelop this building. We're basically scrapping what's there today and bringing a more modern, high energy efficient system into the property.
Okay, so the other question, or the rooftop screening, what you show here where it has the sort of, rectangle on the roof, is that where all the HVAC and everything is gonna go?
There'll probably be smaller units, and if they are visible, we will provide a smaller screening system that hangs off of the units. This is where that giant penthouse that sits there today, which is the big unit that services the entire building. The problem is, and we're not gonna have a lot, because the retail is gonna be on its own HVAC, and they're most likely just gonna be a split system in the ceiling. And then we're gonna have louvers in the back that'll have some fresh air, and then we'll just have some condensers for that can be up on the roof. But this is really to screen the very large penthouse that'll be repositioned, re-coordinated, and updated if need be, with all new components to run the new HVAC system that we're proposing.
And you're saying that anything that may not fall in there,
Would be an individual screening system if necessary.
okay,
And I did raise the parapets a little bit taller, so that helps again in that visual. Again, you won't be at that height.
Mhm.
You're, 50 feet below it when you're on the ground, either on the road system or in the parking lot. So your visual perception going up, and the units would be more likely in the middle of the building. You'll probably never see these units unless you're flying over in a helicopter.
which you could be.
Which the owner make?
Which the owner may, but there is units.
No, that's not in the flight plan.
You can't fly past the utility line, you can't get over that way. You gotta fly the other way.
The other question I had, or one other question I had is, it looks like there's sort of ADA ramps that are coming up near the plaza, is that correct?
Mr. Keller actually designed all of those, yes.
Okay, so when I look at the site plan though, the ADA spaces don't seem to be anywhere near there, and I'm just
That would be
curious if you
Mr. Keller
can.
question.
Okay,
He'll be on next, so we can.
okay,
we'll open it
to
from there.
read.
I drew what he drew.
Okay,
We
just.
shared CAD file.
Right. And then the next sort of bigger question I have has to do with the signage. And it looks really nice now because you don't have any tenants and you don't have any branding and you don't have any branding colors. And I'm just curious what you envision, how these signs will be lighted and how you'll accommodate that.
Yes. I've done this in a couple shopping centers. It's kind of pretty cool. My last one was in Paramus up on Route 4. Sorry, Mayor. But if you look at my architectural elevations in the set that was submitted,
What's your instruction?
that would be a 8. So again, right now, because Weichert has taken the bulk of the upper floors, we're proposing a sign with their branding, they're yellow,
Right.
on the facade. And then the only other signs would be for the retail tenants along the first floor. And what we're proposing is those signs to be actually mounted to the top of the steel canopies, which will have a conduit that runs behind it. It's all LED now anyway. It feeds the sign, So the sign is actually, and that's why we helped write the ordinance this way,
Right.
that these signs will be sticking off the face of the building 3 feet, which is how we helped write the ordinance when this was developed. So each tenant sign will be unique. It could be, I hate to use the word box sign because they're not box signs anymore.
No, well,
But
that's my concern.
Well, that's where they have to still come in and come before zoning as a tenant to get, what we're proposing is we want the tenants to not put anything on the facade, mount it to the top of the steel canopies that we've given you, and however you see fit, they still have to come before you and the zoning board to get a permit on how to detail that.
Okay, because what I've done in other towns, is required, actually not permitted box signs, but required all of the signage to be channel letters, which has allowed people to do their branding and that sort of thing, and I was just curious.
I bet,
Go ahead. Oh, well, I should be talking. In Paramus, and I had this argument with the planner in Bridgewater.
I like it to be letters. Is that what you were
Well-
referring to?
Well, I'd rather it not be an internally lit box sign, sorry,
Of
so,
course.
just because I think that
No,
doesn't look good.
we're.
Okay, but an example,
For the record, that's James Weichert speaking.
Sorry.
as an example, in Paramus, we had a Jersey Mike's. Everybody loves Jersey Mike's. They had a box sign, but it's very architecturally defined. It's not the box signs of our parents, the 1970s, that was cheap. And I had this long discussion with one of my favorite planners, no offense, in Bridgewater.
I'm not offended at all.
Okay. In Bridgewater at the Whole Foods 220,000 square foot shopping center I designed. Modern technology has allowed national sign people, because of LED, you don't need the traditional raceway and box lettering on it. They now will create something that looks like a box sign, but they make it architecturally decorative because it's thinner. It might only be 2 inches deep because they only need LED, and then they put raised letters on top of it.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
So that we got along with in Bridgewater, and she actually loved it once we started to show her. We probably have 8 nationals
Yeah.
that did exactly that. But if you
No,
looked at it,
I
it's a
have
box
also, I have
sign.
also worked on this,
Right.
for Whole Foods, and we have required there to be channel lettering.
Yeah.
It's internally illuminated
So a
LED,
lot
but
of times, right,
it's channel
the
lettering.
old raceways that were 6 inches high
Yeah.
and 8 inches
Yeah.
deep, and you had to run all this wiring through it. Then you mount your big bold letters to the face of it, and you had to paint the raceway a color.
Right,
Now, most nationals, if they're going to do a sign like that, they do these decorative backgrounds, which count as the overall square footage of their sign, but it's decorative in nature, and then they usually have individual letters that sit out in front of it.
right.
Technically, you're getting individual channel letters on a different style raceway than what you're used to seeing in the old world when I
Right.
first started.
And so then the
retail.
other question I have is the Weichert sign that you're proposing, will that be is that an internally illuminated box sign?
Not a box sign, the yellow would be the background. The Weichert letters would be individual channel letters mounted on the yellow tile or whatever product we decide to capture the logo.
So is the yellow gonna be lighted up,
No.
or, no, it's just the black
The
letters?
the Weichert letters.
Oh, okay.
So that you
Alright.
won't see at nighttime with the yellow, you'll see just.
No,
the
that's
letters.
nice, actually, I think. Then the other question I had is regarding, just, can you say this again, which of the monuments, how are the monument signs are all internally illuminated?
The tenant signage will be internally illuminated. The Highline Marketplace sign and the sign itself has ground mounted lights that are shown on Mr. Keller's plan.
Right.
That'll give a gentle glow up as well to help illuminate the structure. But the tenant panels will be a normal internally illuminated, probably with vinyl letters, on the side itself.
Okay, and then the final question I have, I think, is on this facade, you have sort of on the upper floors, on the sort of the columns between the windows, are those lights that seems?
That's that 60-inch
Okay.
light that I mentioned to you that kind of has that soft glow that comes out the sides.
Okay,
So
okay,
they're about 3 or 4 inches wide, but they're 60 inches tall. You say, wow, that's big.
yeah,
right? But look at them on the facade. They're proportionate,
right,
exactly proportionate
okay,
to the mass of the building.
all right.
And they're 20 plus feet in the air, 25 feet in the air.
Okay, Madam Chair, those are the only questions I have right now.
Okay, I'm not sure who would do, Leon or Bill? Leon, do you have any questions?
Sure. Regarding buildings B through H, Will they have rooftop mechanical equipment?
Yes, and it'll be screened the same way, because they're smaller, they're gonna have 5-ton, 7-ton units most likely. So if they're visible, and those buildings, we were able to get taller parapets. So we first start by raising our parapets to try to get a natural screen. If we think when we get the tenants and we see the size units, we determine that they will be visible, and we would probably come back in our final site plan approval, because we'll have tenants and we'll know that those units are taller. Then we'll propose what we call as an advisor or cityscape product that actually gets mounted to the units on all 4 sides. Lots of colors, we'll pick whatever the neutral color is on the building. It doesn't have to penetrate the roof, it's 2 feet off the ground, so you don't get a snow drift issue. And we've used them for years and years and years. So that's how we'll screen the units from B through H.
So you're saying that that decision-making is as a
Well,
result?
most likely, yeah, we're trying to achieve it with the parapets, so if we use a 5-ton small unit, most likely the parapets will screen it. If you get into some of the restaurants, they might have bigger units, like a 7-ton or maybe even a 10-ton unit. Those are taller, and they sit on a 12-inch curb as well. We usually draw those dimensions on our elevations. You'll see a dotted line. If that dotted line goes above my parapet, that's what sends me into providing the screening, and will provide that advisor system company information on the drawings at that time. And that's what's at that other shopping center to be named later in Morris County. It's
So,
the same concern.
so in the future, when you come back for final for each of these buildings, the board will be making a decision at that time whether screening is going to be required, correct?
Yes, we should have a lot more information, and we'll show, if we don't have a tenant, we'll show a proposed unit, and if it's above our parapet, we'll say in our testimony that that's gonna be screened with this, second party, third party system.
Because you mentioned just now that, if it's visible from where?
Again, a lot of these buildings are 24, 25 feet tall with parapets, the roofs are down at like 19. So we're gonna have anywhere from a 4-foot to 5-foot parapet. Again, if you think about your vertical eye perception in the car, in the parking lot, looking up at a building, you're seeing over the top of the parapet. So you have to look at that angle. The units are usually centered in the building, because it gives the best distribution, go front and back in the space. The odds you're gonna see, even if it's a little taller, are slim. If it's a bigger unit and it's sticking 3 feet above the parapet, obviously then yes, we have to screen it. That you'll probably see the tops. But I think with the topography along Route 10 and Johnson Road, the buildings E and F right there, they sit down, the highway's higher, correct? The opposite. The highway's down, the buildings are up. So again, that even helps us even more. If you're traversing Route 10, you're looking up, not looking down on top of the roof. So you're, from 10, you're lower than the buildings. Besides all the landscape Mr. Keller has proposed, you're gonna be looking up past the buildings. So a lot of times we can get most of the units, probably 85% screened just by the natural design of the architecture. And then what falls between the cracks, we provide the third-party screening system. But I've been doing that for years. Every town asks for it.
Well, at some point in time in the future, we'll have to determine, if they're visible from what point, from what vantage point. We went through this on the development on Route 10, so we'll skin this fish at a later date, but, are they visible from what vantage point and from what distance from the building?
You can assess that once you know what you're dealing with.
Yeah.
Not to interrupt you, but to add to what you're just saying,
Okay, Ms.
What-
Wogenblick, you have,
what provokes your
Hold the microphone to you.
What provokes your engineering drawings to provide you with a dotted line?
As we get the tenant work letters, they'll tell us if it's a Starbucks, a Jersey Mike's, or whoever, they'll tell us, I want 2 5-ton units. We have standard specs, we know how tall a 5-ton unit is.
All right.
It's so high and it sits on a 12-inch curve. We transpose that dotted line on our elevation, sitting on the roof, which is down below, we'll draw it right down to the roof. My parapet will be here, and then you'll see a little dotted line that'll go above that shows, oh, we're sticking up 6 inches, or oh my goodness, we're sticking up 3 feet.
So you do have a vantage point. What's your vantage point?
Well, we don't have a vantage point, we just look at it and say, if it's a unit that's 3 feet taller than my parapet, most likely wherever you are on the site, you're gonna see that unit. If it's 6 inches, because again, my elevations are not in perspective. You're looking straight at the building from the ground, 25 feet in the air. The unit's actually in the middle of the roof, not at the edge where my flat elevation shows the dotted line, and if it's 6 inches above that parapet, you're never gonna see it. As I said, if it's 3 feet taller than my parapet, most likely, you're gonna probably be able to see that unit from somewhere on the site, so then that would kick us into, yes, we have to provide this third-party screening. And if there was something so egregious that happened way after we get this approval, and some tenant comes in after the fact, I'm assuming the board has the ability to go back to the applicant and say, you know, you need to
It'll be a
screen.
commitment that it'll be properly.
You'll be able to screen, the system will already be in place, and we'll go ahead. We're not gonna have all the tenants on the back, but that's how we usually do it in our projects. We just lay these units in a 5, a 7, a 10, we kinda know what those sizes are, and we'll draw little pretty dotted lines for you, let you decide.
Any other questions?
I have several more questions.
Sure.
Regarding the exterior architectural scheme that you described here tonight, is that something that you're gonna dictate to future tenants that this is the scheme we've developed, this is the scheme we want, and it's non-negotiable?
Just whisper to her, give me the, that's our intent. We're not proposing that. If I give you the perfect example, because I've done it. If you got a Buffalo Wild Wings, they have a very specific look. We're not proposing to do that here. We would try to get them to bend and work with us. Obviously, they'd want to introduce their yellow somewhere in the facade. But the goal from the applicant is to really get these buildings, have national or other type of tenants come in with their look and work with the facades we have. I can't say it's gonna be 100%. It might be 90% us and 5 or 10% the tenant trying to get their color or their look in there. And again, a perfect example of that unnamed center is the Taco Bell. The town cringed when they heard Taco Bell. Then they found out they had a high-end prototype that looks like a Starbucks. So they demanded in the ordinance that we had to do the high-end one. So if you look at that Taco Bell, even though it's a Taco Bell, I think it goes with the architecture that I proposed for the center. Okay. So again, like I testified earlier, we are proposing a very consistent architectural theme throughout, and we will try our hardest, as the applicant will, to basically get all these tenants to follow that scheme. Like I said, 90%, 95%, they're gonna live with what I've designed. And if there's some way, whether it's their signage or corporate colors somewhere on our facade that we get introduced with, that's what our hope is, to minimize any major drastic changes to
And
the
we'll
elevations.
come back for final approval.
And yeah, so we'll know more then. But the goal of the applicant is not to have someone come in and just, you know, stick the golden arches up there, or, you know, Buffalo Wild Wings look on any of these buildings.
Could you put up exhibit A13, please, again?
Building. See?
13? You may have answered this question, but I just want to confirm it. You see the corner tower there right in the front? And you've got a little feature there, it's a vertical feature, is that one of those 60-inch lights?
Correct.
So each pilaster has a 60-inch light, correct?
As does the 225 building on the 9-foot wide pilaster. Again, those are 20+ feet in the air, so.
And you say they don't impact the lighting plan that Mr. Keller developed?
Low voltage LED on all the fixtures I'm proposing, and it's just a gentle diffused light that comes out the sides. And when you look on my last sheet A34 in the architectural package, it gives you the name of the manufacturer, I believe, and if you had to Google it, you can Google it, it gives you all the photometric, but it's all LED, low voltage, low intensity light, just to give you a glow.
Will they be on 24 hours a day on the back side or the south side of Building B, facing Signature Place?
I could say we're gonna put them on it, they'll probably go on with the parking lot lights, so whatever is agreed, to have whatever security light, and these are not security lights, these are decorative lights, so they would only be on, I believe, when the stores are open, and maybe an hour, whatever I think was agreed to, based on the parking lot lights, because they're not 24/7, are they?
Are there ones on the rear or something?
I don't think there are any on the rear of the building. Building B?
Building B, it faces Signature Place?
I don't believe I showed any of them. not on the side elevations except at the tower. Now, A16 shows you the rear of the buildings. We're not proposing any facing signature posts.
Did you or the applicant give any thought to providing, solar panels on the roof of these buildings?
No.
In regards to buildings A and B, will your HVAC equipment satisfy the NJDEP nighttime noise standards at a residential property line?
Other than the fact that all the trucks on Route 10 are gonna be noisier than my units?
That wasn't my question.
I know, I'm just giving you my standard answer.
If you don't know,
I don't know.
okay. So that would have to be a condition if there's an approval, a noise test prior to CO with all the equipment under maximum load conditions. Correct?
We're getting more high efficient units that are gonna sit behind the screen wall, and anything else that goes on the roof is gonna be smaller in nature than what's up there now.
But again, you don't know it's 50 decibels at the property line, correct?
I do not know that answer. I doubt it we reach it, but no, I can't say definitively without being a sound engineer.
That's all I have. Billy, Henry?
No.
Any, board members?
I just
No?
have a question, I don't know whether it's for you, Mr. Dietz, or, for Eric,
Jason, please.
is, on I think it's A11 here,
Exhibit A11.
yeah, put that one up?
It's the first one.
Oh, you know what, probably,
Oh, 8, 9, 10.
wait a minute, before you do that, hold on.
Again,
Hold on, Eric, first. I'm sorry, it's A9, I'm sorry.
to the aerial. No problem.
Just going around the back of that, around the back of that, self-storage building, now that I'm asking the question, probably more for Mr. Keller, but, in the rare occasion that a tractor trailer may come to drop something off in the back of that building, I didn't see any accessibility for that.
That would be a Mr. Keller question.
Hold on, he'll be up there, right?
Yep.
Mr. Dietz, are there any proposed emergency backup generators on this site?
Not at the present time.
For none of the buildings?
Correct.
Can I ask a question, Jason?
Yeah.
So if we look at A11,
A11 was
225.
Two main buildings.
and then
My favorite.
we compare it to A7,
We did not change the plaza if you're looking at A7 as the plaza design. We've not updated our plans to match Mr. Keller's plans. that
so
were just developed.
A7 will be,
Dictate.
okay, A7,
Correct.
okay.
Eventually, I will be updating all my renderings as we go through the plaza designs for all buildings.
Yeah, we expect to submit a revised plan dealing with all these changes, so we have one consistent set.
Okay. Please go ahead.
I have like 7 questions. How many, you talked about phase 1, phase 2, week or so back, or a month or so back. How many phases is this project?
I'll add, we don't really know. I mean, basically, right now, we have phase 1 and phase 2. One is essentially the larger building with some accessory parking and the basin we talked about. The balance of it is now phase 2. We could come back and do all the buildings in phase 2, or we could come back and make phase 2, 4, 5, depending on how the tenant mix goes and how the development progresses.
How many years do you expect this to take before it's finalized, completed?
I'm sure we can answer that. We hope sooner rather than later, but obviously it's gonna be dependent upon a lot of things. DOT permitting for one, we need that for the access to the front. And that's, we heard Mr. Keller talk about that, that's gonna be some time away.
I heard there's 2 LLCs involved. Are they both here?
They're both Weichert controlled LLCs, correct?
Are they both here?
What do you mean here?
Like, in the room?
Mr. Weichert,
But that's one LLC.
his dad controls both.
Not one of my questions, but this is part of the uncomfort zone that we sit in. That we'll get phase 1 done, as you called it, and then it all goes to dust. Your father is committed as you are?
150%.
I know the answer is yes.
This is an income.
This is the challenge.
If you're going to, speak to
Okay,
Mr.
address him.
Weichert.
Sorry.
No, he will have to, be sworn.
Yeah,
He
be
is
sworn in.
Okay.
And that's not necessary, I think everyone understands my question. How are the LLCs divided?
Do I need to?
We gotta swear.
Why don't you ask questions of this witness, we can bring Mr. Weichert in later if you'd like.
I had a personal vision of the lamps being no higher than 15 feet as being something that could trip tractor trailers. In other words, because they're low enough, the tractor trailers may not see the cantilever of a light fixture and knock into it. Are these set back enough where the radius of a tractor trailer is not gonna disturb them?
And you're asking Mr. Keller, not myself?
Well, if you know, if you don't know, we can
I
defer the
don't know,
question.
Mr. Keller has the plans.
You talk about EV parking, electrical parking
Wait,
stations.
Steve, we're going to
All right, I have nothing
concentrate
left.
on the
I don't have anything.
architect. We'll go,
All my questions came from earlier.
okay,
in
and we'll
past
get back
visits.
to that,
Okay.
okay? Any other questions? No? Okay.
All right, well, we call Mr. Keller.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is there anyone from the public that has any questions of this witness, of what he testified to tonight? No? Yeah, no,
I'm fine,
okay.
sir, thank you.
Very good, thank you.
We call Mr. Keller. Would you like a break or keep going?
Anybody wanna take a little break?
Keep going.
Keep going. Okay.
Okay.
Enjoy the pretty pictures.
Chuck will stay in case questions pop up and you forgot to ask him before he was on the stand.
He was at the other 2 meetings, so might as well stay for the rest of this.
I promised I did a lot, so.
And I had pneumonia. I'm still staying.
I know.
Now, Mr. Keller, you were previously sworn, still under oath?
Yes, sir.
Just a couple of things before I let you go. So between last meeting and this, you submitted a letter to the board dated January 19th, is that correct?
That is correct. That letter provided responses to Mr. Hall's review of January 11th, and also responses to Mr. Maltz's letter of, oh, it says November 16th, that's wrong.
His earlier letter.
January 16th.
Okay.
January.
And you were Mr. Maltz issued a supplemental letter dated January 25th, you've seen that as well?
That is correct, and I have some responses to the remaining comments in there.
Terrific.
So,
All right, you have one more exhibit tonight, is that correct?
I do.
And I believe, let's see, we are up to,
16 is me.
eighth to page 17.
Okay, 817.
And while you're setting up, let us give a little background. The board may recall, we spent a lot of time last time talking about the drop-off area for building A. That's gonna be removed, which is noted in Mr. Keller's letter that I just mentioned, the letter of, January 19th, so. That shows in this plan as well as some other, modifications that were discussed at last meeting. So with that, Mr. Callen, just please
Correct.
mark A17 for us.
So A17 with today's date, it's entitled Exhibit Layout and Dimension Plan with today's date on there. And, hold on a second. I don't know if this is any help or not, but when you make a small copy, everything that's already small gets smaller. Thanks. So, one of the main changes shown on A17 is the removal of the drop-off lane. We had redesigned it before the last meeting, and after the discussion at the planning board meeting 2 weeks ago, and discussions with the applicant, we decided, in reviewing, if we get a daycare center, which is the intent, most of the daycare centers don't have that kind of an elaborate drop-off area. So we've eliminated it, and in eliminating that drop-off, we've picked up 6 parking spaces. And we talked about having an area where daycare a lot of times has a small bus, a 15 or 20 passenger bus. Well, we have a loading area, convenience loading that we had in the front. So that area has now been relabeled as loading/bus area. And so that change has been made. Because of the reconfiguration, we moved 2 of the handicap spaces that had been over across the aisleway near the one tower. We moved them there. That way they're closer to the building. And to go to Ms. Laney's question, and to Mr. Hall's question as well, we had 3 handicap spaces right at the main pedestrian crossing that we've put in here where the speed table is, which is also where the central ADA ramp comes down. So we added 1 more in there because it was very easy. We had a access aisle, we just put another ADA space next to it. And then we had a make-ready EV space that had an access aisle, because you have to have make-ready EV spaces that are ADA accessible. We put the other ADA space there. So again, we had a lot of discussion about, if we have phase 1, what happens next? And Mr. Hall is right. Phase 1 alone, you need 7 handicap spots for the number of spaces we have here. Now, when you go to an overall shopping center, you base the number of ADA spaces on the total parking provided. So with the full build out, we have just under 900 spaces. So that means we have to have 18 handicap spaces for the entire center. And what the ADA regulations set forth is that you distribute them around the center so that they are convenient and, to each of the buildings that are needed. So with the complete build out, we only need 5 over here because it's a percentage. When you look at 260 some spaces required or provided versus the 889, that's like 29%, so 29% of 18 is 5. So we can make that adjustment in the future and take the spaces, take the striping off and take the signs off and go back to 5 when we have the rest of the center. But for phase 1, we have 7 spaces. So there's 1 here by A1, there's 4 in front of A2 and A3, and there's 2 at the western end. Now also, Ms. Laney, I believe the question was, we have an accessible ramp as part of the plaza area. There are, and I know this is the next phase, or that would be in a future phase, we do have 2 accessible spaces, across the aisleway at Building B, so, we provided an accessible ramp within the plaza so that if somebody parks in that vicinity, they have an ability to go to that plaza area. So we've provided multiple places. Actually, we've provided 2 places because the existing tower and the sidewalk up to what is now the main entrance to the 225 building is already ADA accessible. You know, it meets, it's an accessible route today. There's no need for a ramp. Because of the topography of the site, as you head east, parking lot drops, but of course the building floor stays level. So that's why we created a central ramp at the middle of the building, and then for the plaza, we created a separate one there. The other thing is we've shown bollards for the daycare, outdoor play area of the daycare. They obviously would be connected, if there's no daycare playground, there's no bollards there. So, and I only do that because there's no leases signed as of today. So, but if there's a play area, there will be bollards. And we added a sidewalk. We have, as I talked 2 weeks ago about the internal sidewalk system, Mr. Drew sort of pointed out, what about if somebody wants to walk across to Miller's Ale House? We've now provided a sidewalk down to Johnson Road. We looked at it, we had room between the retaining wall and the driveway, so we have a 5-foot sidewalk down to Johnson Road, and then they're on their own. And Mr. Moltz had picked up, talked about if we had cart corrals and wider spaces. And the reason that we'd like to defer that to, we have to come back for final for buildings B through H anyhow. We don't know who that specific grocer is, if it is indeed a grocer. And those smaller grocers, like a lot of national tenants, have specific requirements. We've provided area at the building for cart storage, but some of the smaller grocers, they don't want their carts out in the parking lot, or having cart corrals, I should say, cart corrals out in the parking lot. They provide staff to go bring them back in. So we're willing to work with that if, and we're still open to the discussion about 10-foot wide spaces. But again, this is not somebody going to ShopRite to buy a week's worth of groceries. This is specialty type items. We think that the 9-foot spaces are adequate. We'll defer that to when we know who we're talking about. If we do go to 10-foot spaces, we lose 9. Well, I picked up 6, so we're down 3. And as we've said, we have to come back anyhow, and there may be tweaks to the building footprints. Maybe we lose some square footage, maybe we gain some square footage. Our shared parking analysis, which I know I talked very quickly through 2 weeks ago, using the borough's code, we have enough parking when we look at the hourly variations on a weekday. And the weekday is the critical time because the office space is occupied. On the weekends, we have plenty of parking because the office demand is very small. If we use the Institute of Transportation Engineers parking generation values, what they have physically identified as the actual demand, parking demand for specific uses, we have, in our, using the same parking, shared parking numbers, We have a surplus, the smallest surplus we have is 238 spaces. And what that means is we have a calculated demand of 651 parking spaces, whereas we have 889 spaces provided, as opposed to using the borough code and I buried my, here it is. In the shared parking analysis, we had a surplus of 25 spaces. So, using the borough's standard requirements. And I've done a lot of parking studies over the years, that I've done this. And I believe, and the IP data is based on actual studies of other shopping centers and other uses. And I think that data is solid, so.
Can I just ask you again, what was with the IT data, what?
If we use the ITE data, the shared, the maximum parking demand would be 651 parking spaces, which would yield a surplus of 238 spaces.
That's instead of the 25 to 50?
Correct, correct. I think that was,
Well, just, Mr. Maltz's letter of January 25th, there are a number of things in there, I would call them relatively minor cleanup items, any objection to those?
No.
Details, things like that?
No. The only one, as I said, we'd like to defer is car corrals and 10-foot wide spaces for building C when we come back for final on building C.
Okay, thank
Yeah,
you.
we're asking today for a, if Mr. Brewer determines that it's a variance for the parking, the ordinance does permit us to apply shared parking. Our shared parking analysis shows that we have sufficient parking. If, to be cautious, conservative, that it's a, parking variance, the code requires, I get too many. The code requires 996 spaces when you sum the individual demands of every use, and we have 889. So right now we added 6, so we have 895. So we are asking right now, our shortfall based on the raw data is 101 parking spaces. So I hope that didn't confuse everybody, because they think I'm confused.
The ordinance allows for shared parking, you
Correct.
made that sense.
Yes.
And you want to talk about your planning testimony for the variances, I guess perhaps if there are questions on what he just testified to, before we get to that, maybe it'd be appropriate to do that?
And Mr. Roggenblick had some questions that I think I can answer, so however you wanna.
Well, let's go with our professionals.
Yeah, let's talk about what you just discussed today.
Okay.
So, Eric, in terms of the ADA spaces for phase one, you're gonna provide the required number just for phase one.
We're gonna have 7.
And that's what's required based on the number of spaces you have in phase one only.
Correct.
Regards to phase one only, do you meet the required number of parking spaces?
We will, let me go to. This is. I don't wanna create a structural failure this evening. Back to exhibit A3. To meet the parking demand based on borough code for building A, there will be parking that occurs on lot 45. There will be parking in the existing parking field to the east of building A.
Okay, so for phase one only, there will have to be a shared parking, agreement with the other lot in order to comply, is that correct?
Correct. And one may already exist, though we're moving the property line, and
Yeah,
we can deal with that, yes.
It is, yes.
Regarding phase one only, are the EV stations that you show on your plan, do they conform? Phase one only?
Well, I guess the simple answer is no, but to expound upon that is for commercial properties, the way the law is written is they're all make ready. So we don't physically actually have to put them in the ground.
Don't you have to produce like 3% though, but within the first year?
No, that's the residential.
Okay.
I do the same thing, we do so much residential work, it's 15% of the required total, but that's for residential. Commercial is different, and it's based on the number of parking spaces. And so overall, we need 36. So again, I think when you look at it on a percentage basis, we've provided the required percentage of make-ready spaces by building A to comply when we finish the project. So, and because they wrote the law, they amended the law, though it does practically nothing. And for commercial properties, it is only, you have to provide the infrastructure to be able to put it in, but they did not provide an implementation schedule.
So there's no requirement to actually install the EV stations on a commercial development at some point in time?
But the applicant has committed to, provide that, and we don't have a schedule on that. Because the other thing too is that the technology is evolving rapidly, but we have to have conduit, we have to have, equipment to be able to power the EV chargers in those locations we've identified.
Do your plans show the underground conduit to be installed in order to make the spaces make ready? And where do those conduits go? Do they go inside the circuit breaker, a separate circuit inside the building?
As part of site plan approval, we don't do, conduit layout for anything. The lights, the EV, it's a requirement. I mean, we show them on the plans.
Mm-hmm.
So whether it's our office that will do the conduit layout or whether it's another consultant, that will have to be factored in. And as far as where the power gets pulled from, is part of the coordination with the MEP engineer for the building. Because yes, it's gonna be pulled from the building. So there has to be a provision for having enough power in that building to run those EV chargers. And that is not necessarily a small detail. It's something that has to be planned, and that's part of construction, docs.
I just need to be able to see that in some documents, so when we go to construction, my inspector knows that he's gonna put in these 8 conduits in order to comply with make-ready spaces. And if it's not on a plan that my team doesn't see, we can't make sure that it goes in the ground.
Yeah, absolutely. And, this is all an evolving and kind of a new process. I don't know whether electric subcode, they have a say in it as well, and, so that's between you and them. I've been in your shoes in enough locations,
Because I've had a couple of developments recently that think they're ready for a CO and they're not quite ready, because I ask where the conduit is for the make-ready station, and they look at me like I'm cross-eyed. So, I wanna try to avoid that on this project. That's all I have for now, based on Mr. Keller's testimony for the last half an hour. I have additional questions, but I wanna kinda bring those all together at the end.
Okay, so does anyone on the board here have any questions of his testimony? in the last half hour. We'll deal with that first.
Can I just ask?
Sure,
All right,
absolutely.
Sorry, okay, just for the board, I'm sorry. Can you just so for my edification, for phase one, how many parking spaces are you providing? Is it 267?
Hold on. Oh, so this was, on page 3 of my memo, in, item C2, which is in response to Mr. Hall. No, I'm sorry. C3. Required parking for phase 1 is 433 spaces for building A and 303 spaces for the existing 1625 building. A total of 736. At the end of phase 1, there will be 915 spaces, 261 spaces around building A, and 654 parking spaces throughout remaining on site in the other existing parking areas. So we have more than enough parking.
Okay, and so then just to be clear, so then the total EV at the end of, EV make-ready spaces at the end of phase 1 will be how many?
I forget. I think I wanna say it's 10, but.
At least he's honest.
Or is it 8? So I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's 8.
Okay, and then the ADA for phase 1, you said before, was it 7?
Yes,
Okay.
we had shown 5, we added 2 more, so we have 7 for phase 1. 2 of those will likely be pulled out and moved elsewhere on the site as we move through.
Okay, then just, I think the second question regarding, just this testimony today is, while I understand that you have the ADA spaces near the central ramp, was there any decision as to, people have to get out of, they have to cross parking aisles. And there are other spaces where they wouldn't have to cross parking aisles, and so I'm just wondering what the thought process was there.
I think I know the answer, but I don't guess.
Just like right now.
I don't have it. My belief is that, the spaces, in front of A4 and A5, the area is too steep,
Okay,
so.
Too steep.
Yeah.
okay,
So-
okay, got it.
Cause obviously, location and, and by clustering them at that central location, I mean, there's a speed table, so the route from the parking space to the building side is all at one level. They're not going up, across, down, across, up. So it's all at the pedestrian level, so we've been able to design that specifically to facilitate, man, I'm having trouble talking tonight. Facilitate pedestrian movements.
Okay, and then the, just final question is how many make-ready ADA spaces do you need to provide in the phase 1?
One,
Okay, all right, thank you.
because it's 5%.
5%, okay. All right, those are all my
That's
questions.
it. Any other questions of, Mr. Keller on that?
Parking, yeah. When you talk to the fire department, put fire zones in, will that impact parking?
I don't believe so. They've seen the plan, they've commented, but I need to meet with them to talk about, fire zones. But there are extensive areas where, there are not parking spaces in front of the buildings. So I'm confident that, we won't have an
Okay,
issue.
I just asked that question.
Yep.
So you, said before, if there is a playground, there will be bollards.
Correct.
Now, if there is not a playground, that means there's not a daycare center. Is that correct?
Correct, or, we don't have any tenants, that's the plan. This is the plan that we're asking for approval for.
So the plan is for a daycare center.
Correct.
So if there's a different tenant, you will come back.
To the,
Are you looking at me?
no, I'm looking at.
It's a The parking complies. I guess the answer for the board is if it's gonna change the dynamic of the site, we have to come back. If the building's gonna stay the same, and it becomes more the retail user, and the parking complies,
The site plan would change though slightly, right, because, you wouldn't have a playground.
the playground would come out, that's pretty much the
Yeah.
only change. The parking lot
Yeah.
would stay the same, we've taken out the drop-off area for the daycare, so
Right.
that wouldn't be there anyway.
Right.
So I suppose the board could condition the approval if there's no daycare, we just take the playground out. That if we have a daycare, we'll include the playground
Right.
plus the bollards.
So the entrance to that, where you would normally enter the, daycare, that will stay the same for a retail user or?
Correct, because
Okay.
we've taken out that drop-off loop, which is regular parking.
It's unlikely that that end of the building would be a retail use, just because it doesn't have great visibility. Which is why, it was an ideal location, like a daycare center, because they don't wanna be, I've done other daycares in shopping centers, and they tend to wanna be away from other activities.
I think we're confident we'll attract one, of course, our own folks are gonna be there, which,
Right.
good reason the daycare folks don't wanna be there.
Yes. So, I just wanted to qualify it that, because we don't have any tenants signed up.
Okay, but I wanna ask a question, maybe it'll be later at your discretion, about that fire and parking, and you want me to wait till later and just do what we talked about tonight?
No, let's see, fire
Okay,
away.
so in the rear of the building now, okay, when you go behind there, there are big areas that are for, no parking fire zone.
We're keeping those.
You are?
We have one up against the building, which also
I'm
doubles
talking
it.
about all along the back of the parking, behind, that goes to the back of, the Sunrise.
Oh, that's over here. We're
Yeah.
keeping that over here. That's staying. There's an emergency,
There's an emergency, but there's also
a-
big lines where you can't park.
that's staying.
Not this little spot, when you first go in there, I drew it here, it's there before, but
Eric, maybe check your existing features, plan.
It doesn't show on the site plan, on the survey.
I can show you my drawing. I don't want it to be an exhibit because I'm embarrassed,
That's
but,
right.
so it almost,
And unfortunately, Exhibit A1, which is our existing aerial,
yeah. it
there's
doesn't
too
give
much
it-
shadow, and
Okay,
you can't
so,
see anything.
so here's my concern. How's a fire truck going to get in there and turn to go into Sunrise?
Our intent, and I thought our plan accurately showed this, whatever is there today for the connection to Sunrise is staying exactly as it is. And I'll verify that and make sure that it is staying exactly as it is. But we showed that based on what we. It's not showing, it may be a layer that we turned off on the plan for clarity, but whatever striped out area exists today is staying so that you still have access to sunrise.
Eric, on Google Earth, there's 4 of those hatched out areas, 2 up against the building and 2 facing sunrise.
Yeah,
Before you say that, you might wanna really do a little,
that's probably more
Deep dive
accurate
into
than
that.
my drawing.
cause this looks like it's gonna knock out several spaces.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I don't know why there would be 2 up against sunrise, the emergency access over to sunrise lines up with their parking lot. I mean,
Yeah.
cause we plotted the easement. There's an easement on
Right.
both properties to allow for that when sunrise was approved, which I didn't do, to allow for that connection through. Why there's other, you know,
Yeah. There's areas to
striped out areas,
Yeah, but I think to show, if it's to the west, I guess, Leon, is that where you're
Well,
talking?
it looks like these
Two more?
additional striped out areas are to the east, heading towards.
Like
Johnson
this,
Road.
this is what it looks like, Leon.
Oh,
Correct.
Oh, I get it now. Shows it right
But
here.
I'm sure it's exactly like Liz's, Google Earth. No, no, that is not, if you drive back there, it does not look like what's on this.
It's something we can't resolve tonight, Eric, we'll have to take a look at it.
Yeah, so you'll take a look at that? You'll
So
take a
in
look at that?
consultation with my client, those existing, striped out areas is, because that's where their current warehouse, their storage facility is, which will no longer be there. They have internal storage for their operations in the building.
The ones that are alongside of,
On the east end of the building,
yeah,
that's where they have storage areas. Those will no longer be there because that's ground floor, and that'll now be retail. So that's why we have a centrally located loading area at the back. And, you know, and that's where the service corridor is, and we also have loading out front. So we don't need that anymore because of the change of use of the building, so.
So the only hatching you're proposing to keep is the one that provides emergency access to sunrise.
And, creating a centralized loading area.
Yep.
Up against the building.
And the one up top, southeast corner, southwest corner for turnaround.
Yes, we have, you're right, Mayor, we have a turnaround at the end,
Southwest, right?
yeah, southwest corner. Yeah, we have a turnaround area there. I anticipate that more, employees and stuff will park back there than customers.
Eric, something you said in your testimony regarding the shared parking, for building B, you said, second, third story or office, they're very lightly used during the weekend, correct?
For Weichert, that's building A.
I'm sorry, for building A.
Yes.
I misspeak that. But aren't realty offices quite busy on a Saturday?
That would be the sales office. This is their corporate offices on the second and third floor. There is a small, sales office on the ground floor, and doing a lot of work for Weichert. The traditional, the historic, going to the realtor's office on the weekend doesn't happen anymore. You're looking at it on the internet, you're zooming, and you're just going out to the houses that you wanna look at. So even closings are not, you're not going to an office. Some people do, but you're not necessarily going to an office to do a transaction.
So is that noted on the floor plans that the sales portion of that office area?
Is on the first floor. We note that has a different parking standard than the second and third floor.
And that's relatively small area compared to the floor
Yes.
area of the second and third floors?
Yeah, the sales office on the first floor is 4505, I believe.
Square feet?
Yeah.
Oh, we're done.
It's in, It's in the table on
You're done.
sheet 2 of the
You're done.
I'm done?
He says you're done.
Okay, I'm stopped, I'm not talking anymore.
I have a couple more questions if nobody, okay, so we talked last time about that path that's going to go behind Building A over to Signature Place.
It's actually be next to Building B, it'll be in it'll be the Building B phase. And we'll make the connection over to Signature Place. We have to work out an easement agreement with Veris.
So it's not, so I spent some time there today, and there are a bunch, several abandoned shopping carts where the people have already made a path.
Right.
That is not where the path is going. Okay.
As
I mean, that would be treacherous, I'm telling you.
Yeah, we mentioned that last time.
Yeah, we mentioned that last time, I said, just because people have decided that they think that's a good place for them to walk across, and we're not gonna stop them from walking across there.
Right.
I'm not putting my name to it.
That's why they abandoned the carts.
Well, they might wanna come to those retail stores, you know,
Well,
I just tell you.
They'll have to
understood.
use that tough crossing that they use now, because it's very steep right there.
Yes, why they picked that spot, I don't know.
It was open, that's it.
Yeah.
We've had preliminary discussions with Veris, they're open to the idea, but, you know, we have to go through a process.
Okay, so, is there anyone from the audience that would like to ask? Oh, okay, I thought we got through them.
I think the mayor,
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
and this goes back to Johnson Road sidewalk here. You have you eliminated that?
I'm sorry.
Right here at the end,
Oh,
you
at the end,
have
the
the
sidewalk at
sidewalk
the end.
on the very end. Have you eliminated that?
I
I hope you have eliminated, let's put it that way.
I'll eliminate it, I didn't take it off the plan yet.
Because it's going nowheres, it's in the road, which narrows the road. I don't see the value of it. I mean, I would end it at the edge of the road. And edge of the driveway there.
Okay, we'll take it out.
Okay, that means you can definitely put in the.
Oh, we're gonna put in the one at the northern driveway.
Yeah, no, I'm saying the connection too. Okay.
Well, we
You said
can
you're
as
gonna
long
do
as
that,
Veris
yeah.
agrees
All right,
to
you're
it.
taking that out, good. That's it.
Eric, just getting back to my question I asked before
It's
about.
gonna end at the driveway though, right?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. The, behind building B, just in a slim chance of a tractor trailer coming back there.
You know, it would be, there's no need for a tractor trailer to go back there. I mean, we have provided,
Just for the storage aspect of it.
I mean, for self-storage, you're not, you know, they would not get, if they get a box truck, you know, maybe a.
I know how, but somebody may put something on a tractor trailer, gets dropped off at the storage place. Is there a provision or is there gonna be a problem for that truck to transverse back there somehow?
Well, I think I haven't specifically looked at that, I mean, we ran a fire truck through, cause that's usually, you know, the truck that we wanna make sure it can get through all parts of the site, which we did. A full-size tractor trailer probably can't get behind the building without going through parking spaces. And I don't necessarily want to encourage them, you know, to go back there. A smaller, what we call a WD-40, which is a 28-foot box, that can maneuver, that's actually more maneuverable than a straight truck.
I get it, but you're gonna have one.
We can look at it and see if,
Something to take a look at, that's all.
How about signage that says they can't go back there?
Something,
we could put up
because
signage.
once you're back there, if you get back there, you're stuck.
Well,
Just take a look, that's all.
Okay.
That's true. That's a future final site plan application.
Yeah.
We can deal with it then. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Hall.
Good question.
We should. Cause I know we talked
Make a
about
note.
this previous, way back when and all that other kind of stuff, so.
Mr. Mulch? Sure.
I'm just gonna focus on, two things that Eric, addressed. They both relate to the grocery store. There's the cart corrals and the 10-foot width, for the parking stalls I recommended for the grocery store use. I understand what he's saying, that it's a smaller store, and they have different characteristics, and he wants to defer it. I would just point out that, typically you wanna clear the carts out of the parking lot. So it's gotta be readily policed by the store itself. Otherwise, they begin to take up spaces by people leaving carts in spaces, which happens under the best intentions. So that's something that has to be considered somewhere down the road. The other part is a recommendation about the 10-foot wide parking spaces. I would note that in the Briarcliff application, they have a larger supermarket, and the Kohl's right next to it. And if you look at the site plan, they have 10-foot wide stalls all around those areas that would access the Kohl's and the supermarket. The rest of it is 9-foot wide. So this is in line with what I was recommending, that, and I gave a computation of how it would work out, an estimate of what they would lose. But as Mr. Keller said, they want to defer this, down the road until they come in with final for phase 2. I would just, ask the board with input from Leon if possible. If you have to identify, a variance for parking, how do you base it, with this unknown related to the grocery store? How many stalls you're gonna lose for parking corral, if any, or will they need to go to 10-foot or not? 10-foot wide, how do you identify it at this point? Or does it apply because it's preliminary? Possibly Leon has an answer.
I don't know, maybe I'll defer to the legal minds in the room here, but I would think, if it's the board's desire to make certain number of spaces 10 feet wide, and it makes the parking variance worse, you would have to go back to amend the preliminary for the entire tract. Because the parking variance is being analyzed and presented on an entire tract basis. So if that did happen, I think you'd have to amend the preliminary for the whole tract, and obviously the final would speak for itself. I don't know if that makes sense, but.
It does.
So we can handle it procedurally, Harold, it would just be amended preliminary and part of the, final site plan for that building.
Well,
That's something we'll have to keep an eye on as we work through our way, whether it's one future phase or 7 more phases. We have to keep going back and looking at the parking to see if that parking variance is gonna change. My guess is it probably will, and it might change more than once, but that's something we'll all have to keeping our eye on as time progresses.
I mean, we anticipate, this is our vision, this is
Right.
our goal. It evolves over time, and we would have to update the shared parking analysis, accordingly.
Well, and the resultant variance also.
Right. If it indeed is a variance and not just under that shared parking umbrella. That's definitely for these legal minds.
The, one other thing I'd like to point out, I just saw the layout for the daycare center area, which responded to the comments from the last meeting. Just got it tonight, but it does look acceptable to me.
Would you consider, this is just a thought, at the daycare center, making a couple of spaces restricted, like, from 7 to 9 and 4 to 6 drop-off, daycare drop-off pickup only, right near the front, 2 or 3 spaces? I don't know. Something to think about?
We could think about it, yeah.
Okay.
It may become a requirement of, of the operator. Part of their lease negotiations with the owner.
And I have another question. because, so I wanna talk about that intersection at Malapartis and Littleton Road, because there was some data that came up about how long it was going to take, for that light to change. And does that light, is there a different cycle for that light based on traffic
Time of day.
conditions as far as like commuter traffic? Is it different at 9 o'clock in the morning and at 5 o'clock at night than it is at 2 in the afternoon?
I don't have the signal timing directive with me, but knowing it's a county signal, not a state signal, the county controls that section of road. They generally have a timing schedule for the morning peak hour. A lot of times the PM peak hour is different. Other hours of the day, whether at 2 o'clock when there's more school traffic, does it have a different timing? I don't know sitting here tonight, but if you look through, I'm pretty sure that if you look through, if you still have that big paperweight of a traffic study, it's buried all the way in the back. But we did get the timing directive from the county.
Because I happened to be stopped there, and when the light turned, I quickly got my phone out and timed it, and it was 1 minute, 7 seconds, .89. Not, and the number that we were given before was less than a minute.
Well,
It was 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I don't know, I'm just saying it's, and we know nothing is going to change there, so, as far as, you know, they're not going to change it because of this development. But I was just
Yeah,
curious where those numbers came from.
yeah, most of the traffic from our development is gonna be through traffic on Littleton. You know, anybody who goes out Johnson Road is most likely going, you know, they're not gonna go down, and unless there's another issue, they're not gonna go that way to go to the train station area, to downtown Morris Plains. They're just gonna go out Littleton and go down.
Eric, did you say you were in discussions with the county about that driveway Littleton Road intersection?
No, well, we're proposing to change the lane usage and modify the timing. We'll have to, that's with the engineering department, the planning board already approved it, but timing changes, that's a Chris Vitz, the county engineer's jurisdiction. That the planning board doesn't get involved in that.
But Chris Fitz is involved in that now?
We haven't, we've had a preliminary discussion, just informed them of it, but we haven't done anything, beyond that until we get through, you know, this process.
So there may be a need to amend the site plan drawings once those issues are resolved with the
Now,
county engineer.
physically, we're not changing anything, it's striping,
Well,
and it's a
striping's
single
different, right?
drive.
Striping's gonna be different potentially.
Yeah, it would be a left through lane and a right turn only lane. Now, the question is, at what point do we do that? That was based on the full
Right.
development program. I don't know that we need it for phase one, just because the amount of traffic is not gonna reach that level.
Okay.
Everyone,
Steve has questions.
you have questions?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yes. Back to some clarity. Because of the 261-foot easement girth for the power lines, what restrictions does that place on you in terms of EV, trees?
We can't put
Parking.
EV chargers in the JCP&L easement anyplace. So they all have to be outside the easement. They don't like trees in, especially the high tension transmission area. So instead of having to negotiate that, we just took them all out. We have a nice planting plan, but they're all shrubs. Cause otherwise you get these little stubby trees and you might as well plant something nice, so, but you can't plant any trees, and that's the other reason, the lights within the easement, we can go to 20 feet, not within 75 feet of the signature place or sunrise, and we can't do it inside the easement, anything taller than 15. In the front, we could go to 20 feet. Well, to have 15-foot high poles and then 20-foot high poles doesn't present well. So we just put everything as 15 feet, which is the height of the fixtures that currently exist in the parking field by 225. So everything on site is 15 feet in height, and that's to the lens. So there's full clearance underneath any of them.
So will building A have any EV charging stations?
They do, they have to be outside the easement. Most of them are in the back of the building, in the parking area behind. If you look at sheet 6 of our plans. And then there's 2 in front by tenant space A1, because they're out of the easement.
And the 15-foot lamps, how tall are the tractor trailers that could be coming to service the facility?
By law, they're limited to 13'6".
Oh, okay.
So there's 1.5 feet of clearance, and we always place these, and actually we place them more for the fire department, especially the aerial truck with the I call it the basket for lack of a better term.
He's got a separate steering.
Oh.
I think.
No, we're not that elaborate here.
No?
Oh, I was gonna say, I know Morristown does, I didn't think
Right, I
Morris
thought you
Plains
did
had
too.
that.
No? Okay.
So there's a big overhang, so we always try and keep things out of of that path. So, but there's clearance underneath the lights.
You had talked about, okay, so there's 2 different water management systems. One is the eco-friendly catch basins. I'm calling it the wrong word, but.
All the inlets are standard inlets. They have this castings on there that meet the echo requirements so that floatables don't get, the old inlets had a big opening in them and sticks
I
and.
think he means fire retention.
The retention basins,
Oh.
that's what I meant, yes, bioretention basin, thank you. So that's one. The other one was storm drains. And we casually dismiss it as, well, it'll just connect to Route 10, and if the diameter of the pipe is too small, c'est la vie. I mean, was any calculations made to determine that the water runoff that we were gonna catch from our storm drains wasn't gonna or is that even the responsibility of this board to know whether it's gonna be captured properly with Route 10?
Mr. Hall brought up this point that the intersection of Route 10 and Johnson Road floods at points today. So what we're responsible for as an applicant is to take, to compare what runoff there is today. Remember, there are no detention basins at all, 0 on the property today. And that provides a baseline. This is how much water comes off of the site today. Some of it, only a portion of the site goes to the intersection of Johnson Road and Route 10. Another part goes where the, oops, I'm sorry, Karen. She just, goes into the system where that big stone line channel is today. And then a very small part of the site goes to Johnson Road. So, but we have to analyze each of those 3 points and reduce the rate of runoff, not to what it is today, because we are increasing impervious with this development. We have to reduce it by 50% for the 2-year storm. 55, yes, 50, half. We have to cut it in half for the 2-year storm. Those are the storms that happen very frequently. We call it a 2-year storm. It's, if forget what so, and then we have to reduce it by 25% for the 10-year storm. And we have to reduce it by 20% for the 100-year storm. This 100-year storm are those bigger storms that.
Yeah, good luck with that.
So, no, we meet that and we actually exceed that at each of the 3 points. So each of the detention systems meet the reduction. So after this site is developed, and even in phase 1, we are reducing the rate of runoff that currently goes out to the state highway. So I'm not saying that you don't have an issue, but I'm saying is that we've done our part to reduce and meet the requirements in the borough code and in the state code. And I have to prove that to DOT. I don't have to prove it to DEP, but I have to prove it to DOT. Because they're gonna look at the stormwater from this site, as much as Mr. Hall did, and probably find 6 other things that they want us to look at. I'm certainly happy to bring it up with DOT as part of our review, but we've done our part to reduce what gets to that system. I don't know what's in that road, we didn't analyze downstream of where we tie in, because at that point, at that inlet where we tie in, we've met the requirements of the borough and state regulations.
That's all I have.
Anyone else on the board? How about the public? Are there any
If I
questions?
can just jump in, we have
Okay.
planning testimony still from Mr. Callum. Perhaps you can do that first, then we can have one final round of questions from the board and from the public at the same time.
Well, it's 10 o'clock. So I'm just thinking, before he goes to the planning, if there's any questions from the public on the engineering side.
On behalf of the residents of Morris Plains, Sue, I have no questions.
Excuse me, Mr. Moore. Excuse
Thank
me.
you, Jack.
Excuse me, Mr. Maltz, the professional, would like to speak?
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought.
Yeah, there was one other thing, currently we haven't do it yet, which is why I didn't bring it up, but being that you're gonna move to the planning, I think this should. Probably the only other comment I had of significance that's left over appears on page 7 of my latest report, and it's under item B, the bottom, and it talks about you have the new access off of Route 10, and it deals with the right turnout to come into the site. And I addressed the point that you have a crosswalk that's, as soon as you turn in, just after you get out of that turn off of Route 10. And the crosswalk goes from, by building E1 space to across near F4, it's opposite the little plaza. One thing Mr. Keller and I talked about, I questioned the visibility. The signs have been put in, striping has been put in, but we note that under current state requirements, the pedestrian crosswalk, you have to allow the pedestrian to steps into the road to the point where he gets off the road, that the car is supposed to be stopped. This is 38 feet of crossing, which is almost 11 seconds if a pedestrian stepped into that crosswalk. That means a driver coming off Route 10 eastbound, going straight, would have to stop for a maximum of 11 seconds. Now, you talked about the access off the 10. So what happens then with the visibility of somebody coming up behind him, another vehicle? Are they gonna be readily gonna see it? And just one thing I asked of Mr. Keller is for the plaza on building F by F4, it appears to be a wall there. How high is the wall? And how does that affect visibility of a driver coming around the turn to be able to see somebody that's in the crosswalk or even another car that's in the crosswalk? I mean, I just drew a straight line going from the crosswalk, from the middle of that through lane, going back towards Route 10, the ramp, and it cuts over the wall. So I'd just like him to address this if he could. That's the last significant question I have.
So, I put Exhibit A2 back up, and what we're talking about, talking about coming in off of Route 10. This is designed at about 15 to 20 miles an hour. I have to double check with the radius here. But the wall at the point where it starts to curve away from the roadway, about 2.5 feet in height. So, and this is coming up from Route 10, towards the, crossing. So we can take another look at it, but I think we have sufficient sight distance for somebody to stop. And the thing is, if there's a vehicle, the first vehicle stop, you know, now your point of view is not of the pedestrian in the crosswalk, it's of that car sitting there. So now you have, the point that you're looking at is, you know, 20, 25 feet back, and now you're looking across that lawn area. But we can take a look at that. I think there's enough, separation, for that crossing. And we do have Mr. Maltz's comments in a prior review was to add a pedestrian crossing sign, with a distance, which we've added as you come in. We've cleaned up the, striping so that it's clearly demarcated that there's a left turn lane and then there's a through lane. So there is 2 lanes, there is extra width there for those vehicles coming in.
Okay, if I could just interject, I agree, Eric has cleaned it up in terms of signing and striping as I requested to provide as much advance warning and safety as possible what he's shown. What I would like him to do, and it should be pretty easy, it would have to come off his proposed grading and the existing grading along Route 10 on this turnout, is to draw a profile based on the design speed of that curve of the ramp coming off the highway, what the required sight distance would be from a pedestrian who's right in front of that through lane going south on that new drive, coming across for whatever the required distance is, in consideration of the wall and the existing grading, being the site is higher, so you can be looking up. And then secondly, the other point that he raised about a car position, that I was gonna raise that anyway. If one car was stopped there, from the rear of that car, figuring about 20 foot long space, what is the profile from that point, considering the design speed of the curve, sight distance, going back, to just show those 2 short profile lines, to assure us that it's gonna be a safe operation. But he has complied with the signage and striping that I requested.
Okay.
Eric, does the DOT set the design speed for that driveway coming off Route 10?
They'll review it, yeah. Yeah, they will.
You think they'll take the review in to this site far enough to pick up on this issue?
I've stopped trying to anticipate what the DOT's gonna ask me.
Now you mentioned this retaining wall, as it curves away from the driveway, was only like 2.5 feet high. The corner closest to the crosswalk, how high is it at that point?
Well, it actually ends, oh no, it ends before the crosswalk, but at the, get my bearings here, southeast corner of that plaza, I mean, it's like 1 foot high.
Okay.
Cause it, you know, the ramp coming in off of Route 10, sorry Harold, comes up because this is lower and we're coming up to grade, and this, you know, that crosswalk is an accessible route.
So a clear line of sight being typically 30 inches high, would you be looking right over the top of that wall or not necessarily?
Eye height is 3.75 feet.
Right.
You know, we generally, you know, we do sight lines to a vehicle, so it's 3.7 foot, 3.75 object height, 3.75 eye height.
Mhm.
That's the line that we draw. So we can look at that.
Okay, anything else, Mr. Moore?
No.
Okay.
I would like to see those profiles.
Okay. So we'll be back to the public. I think,
Yeah.
Mr. Houston, you had a
I
question?
do, yes, and I'm not sure, I know you, sorry, Bill Houston, 80 Glenbrook Road, Morris Plains. I know you provided testimony as the engineer, so this might be more of a planning question, so I can hold off till you get to that, but with respect to, sorry, building B, right, which is the proposed warehouse space that's on top.
Self-storage.
Self-storage, I'm sorry, self-storage space on top. I'm assuming, is there any sort of, I know we don't have a tenant yet, but is there any sort of restriction on there for, times of day that trucks can go back there? Because there is Signature Place just behind there, which is residential, right? So the concern would be any noise that's generated from that. So I don't know if that's a engineering or a planning question, but.
It's really an operator question.
Okay.
Generally, they have limited hours as to when they will allow customers to come in.
Okay.
Well, it's also a phase two question.
Right.
We'll be back at some later date to talk about that building and the tenant when we get final approval, so that could be a more appropriate question.
Okay, the phase two. Okay,
Yeah.
understood. All right, thank you.
Just Bill, I think that's why they moved it further on down there. The residential is much further away from that building than it is up further behind building A outside. So there's tennis courts or a dog park back there as well,
right.
so.
Tennis court, dog park,
Yeah,
and
the residents are
the
much
one
further
manor
away.
building.
We decided not to put the grocer back there.
Right. And for what it's worth, I think putting the playground, or proposed playground, back behind the Sunrise, I think it's great. I think people there would love to listen to kids playing all day. So for what it's worth, I think it's great. I know it's not time to comment, but thank you.
Thank you.
Do you
Anything else
want-
from the public?
No, so it's 10 after 10.
Your call, we have planning testimony, that's all we have left for tonight. We have to come back, it sounds like, for Mr. Waltz's question on the profile. So, how long are you planning for, 10, 15 minutes?
Yeah.
You've got 5 variances and 6 design waivers to cover.
Well, we talked about a lot of them, so.
You've outlined them, but now you gotta justify them.
Okay. We'll cut it off at 10:30, and so you have 20 minutes.
A little bit more time to shave parking.
Okay. Planning, got my planning hat on. We have 4 variances. Minimum setback of an interior road from a lot line shared with the commercially zoned property is 5 feet where 1 foot is proposed. This is section 13-5.5.1 by 3.3.
You sure which one is that, is that exhibit A2 up there, Eric?
This is exhibit A2. That occurs right at the corner of the Stop and Shop property, the southeast corner of the Stop and Shop property. Currently, that driveway is over the line. It is currently on Stop and Shop's property, has been forever. And we're moving it 1 foot into our side of the property.
Who designed that?
What, the original? I don't know whoever designed Stop and Shop.
Let's check.
I think that was Peter Meyer.
You go back.
Yeah, could have been. I reviewed that for the board as your
See, I know
Harold
you're
seat.
involved,
Parking, 996 spaces are required after the EV credit of 36 spaces. 889 spaces are provided, now 895. I've listed it as variance just to be cautious and conservative. 13-5.510 as an Oscar 6, light levels at the exterior track line shall not exceed half a foot candle except where driveways intersect a public street. We exceed it at the shared driveway with Stop and Shop. It's not a public street, so that generates a variance. We do exceed half a foot candle at the Johnson Road driveways and at Route 10, but those are public streets. 13-5.9F, steep slope disturbance occurs in areas with slopes 20% or greater, which is not permitted. Steep slope map is in the set of plans. It is colored, and the steep slopes are scattered throughout the property, and generally they are man-made, and are no significant extensive steep slopes. So you have to look at the positive criteria and the negative criteria. Both variances may be granted under either what they call the C1 hardship or the C2 flexible, where the planning proof or the benefits outweigh the detriments. And that's set forth in municipal land use law at 40:55D-70 C1 and C2. We believe that the steep slope variance falls under the C1 hardship, because they're scattered throughout the site. It would be impossible to redevelop this property without disturbing those steep slopes. And C1 says, and I won't read it all, you've probably heard it a million times, but it's by reason of exceptional narrowness, shallowness, or shape of a specific property, or B, by reason of exceptional topographic conditions or physical features uniquely affecting a specific piece of property. And I think that's the case here, is that these are man-made as part of prior improvements to the site. And that those specific unique characteristics result in a peculiar and exceptional practical difficulty to, or undue hardship to develop the property. So, as I said, the steep slope variance, in my opinion, falls under that C1 category of a hardship. We have an open drainage channel, we have areas where embankments were created. Under your code, we're allowed to create 3-on-1 slopes. We're creating a steep slope. In this case, we're removing those steeper areas, and generally we're improving that condition. Now, the rest of the variances fall under the C2, which says where application or appeal relating to a specific piece of property, the purposes of this act, the municipal land use law, would be advanced by a deviation from the zoning ordinance requirements, and the benefits of the deviation would substantially outweigh any detriment. And the grant of a variance to allow that departure advances those purposes of planning. And the purposes of planning, we believe, will be advanced by the granting are such. Purpose A, to encourage municipal action to guide the appropriate use or development of all lands. E, to promote establishment of appropriate population densities that will contribute to the well-being of persons, neighborhoods, communities, and the preservation of the environment. G, to provide sufficient space and appropriate locations for a variety of residential, commercial, and other uses to meet the needs of all New Jersey citizens. H, to encourage the location and design of transportation routes which will promote the free flow of traffic. And I, to promote a desirable visual environment through creative development techniques and good civic design. And I think this development, our proposal, really embodies that purpose of planning. So as I indicated, the driveway setback is off the southwest corner of proposed building C at the southeast corner of the Stop and Shop building is an improvement over current conditions. The parking, I think we've talked about enough. We've done the shared parking analysis and show that we have a surplus. The variance for the lighting is for the public benefit. We're doing it because the roadway transitions from our property into a cross-access area that's shared with Stop and Shop and functions really as a public street. So I think the intent, plus it's good design to appropriately light a driveway.
Just do the negative criteria for all the
Yeah.
no negative impact.
Steep slope, right. Negative criteria. The board must find that each of the variances can be granted without substantial detriment to the public good and without substantially impairing the intent and purpose of the zone plan and zoning ordinance. So the steep slope disturbance will not adversely impact the public, nor create any erosional issues. So we're actually eliminating those steep slopes, and the ones that, they'll be mitigated through slope stabilization and new plantings. We have heavily planted bioretention basins, and the site is, well landscaped throughout. The driveway setback is nominal, and again, as I said, it's an improvement over what's there today. When we were developing the ordinance and working with the borough on this, I raised this point. And Mr. Hall and I had a lot of discussion about that. We did the best we could, and this is where we ended up. So it is an improvement over what's there today where it actually encroaches. The lighting, again, it's a benefit to illuminate that area appropriately. And it's consistent with the lighting that exists, and will be an enhancement and will provide appropriate public safety. So to that extent, the variances will not impair the intent and purpose of the zone plan. I think we've generally met those criteria, and these deviations are relatively minor in scope, and they can be granted without substantial detriment to the public good and general welfare. Now, to design waivers, we don't have that same level of proofs associated with them. These fall under site plan design, but they also need to be discussed. So we have, I think we ended up at 4 design waivers.
Yeah, the parking space size being one, we talked about.
Right, so we talked about the parking stall size. The ordinance requires 10 by 20 throughout. We are providing 9 by 18 or 9 by 20. We've asked to defer the supermarket, grocer to that appropriate phase and looking at 10 by 20. The other design waiver is alteration of existing topography greater than 1 foot within 5 feet of the adjoining property. And we do this along the western side behind buildings C, G, and F, where we get close to the Stop and Shop property. There's no impact there. I mean, that's Stop and Shop's loading area. It's not really a public area. And even though we're within 5 feet of the property line, it'll all be stabilized.
There, right?
We have a wall there, that's correct. There's also a request for a design waiver for not providing street shade trees along Johnson Road, fully due to the power line easement and the flight path of the helicopter. We are providing, as you can kind of see on Exhibit A2, we are providing trees behind Building H and Building D, but we aren't, and we have some down south of the southern driveway, but in the middle of that area, from that southern driveway to Building H, we have the power line, we have the helipad. So we really can't put them in there in those areas. And then Mr. Hall raised a question both under variance and design waiver about sidewalks along Johnson Road. There is a provision in the code that says the planning board can determine if the sidewalk system within the development provides same or greater circulation for pedestrians, then you don't need to provide it along the roadway. And I think my testimony 2 weeks ago is that we have a very comprehensive sidewalk system within the site, and it also provides a connection to Stop and Shop, and pending final sign-offs from Veris, will provide a connection over to Signature Place, and we have added a sidewalk down Johnson Road at the northern driveway to provide a path for people to walk across to Starbucks or Miller's Ale House.
that's all of them.
Right, the fire zones and the the paved access for the fire department, I believe we will confirm that with the fire department. And that covers variances and design waivers.
So if the fire department wants fire zones, you will install them and show them on the site plan?
That is correct. Since we already had a signage and striping plan, we have some clean space to show that.
All right. Can't quite see the clock, I guess it's at 10:30? 25. Any questions of that testimony?
Well, you're going to have questions?
I don't actually.
Okay, and
No.
Leon?
Yes, I have questions.
Okay. I mean, are they like 4 minutes long, or do you think we should wait till next,
They're not 4 minutes long.
okay,
Are they 15 minutes long or an hour long? I can't answer.
okay. So they may take some time, so we will continue with the planning questions.
I have just one comment on one of the variances and, the lighting variance. And that definitely should be approved because since they are not in that building, all the lights are out. And anybody who goes at night to Stop and Shop, it's dangerously dark when you drive in. So light would be wonderful.
All right, so we'll be
Okay.
carried to your next meeting, which is February, is it the 12th, is that right?
You're on the every
February
2 week
12th.
schedule, so.
And you will extend the time for a decision until that time, or?
Absolutely. Is the 12th correct?
Yes, it is.
And we'll be here at 7:30 in this room.
Excuse me,
Okay.
Judith, we don't know the weather in February, can you do it to the end of February?
Absolutely.
Okay?
So we're carrying out further public notice to February 12th, 7:30 in this room.
And you will send me an email about that, correct?
Absolutely, Karen.
Thank you.
Okay?
Okay,
Madam Chair, a couple of comments.
yeah,
At the next hearing, can we have all the exhibits in this room? All of them? I'm gonna be referring to some of those,
okay,
all right? And Eric, if you could work on, I don't need this for the next meeting, a detailed calculation of existing and proposed sewage flow.
Oh,
Yep.
I didn't send that to you?
No. But, building by building, use by use, the DEP flows that are generated. I know you made a comment, a net increase of 11,000 gallons per day.
Okay,
So let's break that out into very specific detail. Please.
okay.
Thanks.
I really want B through H as building by building, cause it might change. Can I lump B through H?
Best you can do.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, I can do it, it's just, I don't know it's subject to change.
But at some point, you're gonna have to pull the trigger to apply for your TWA. So give that some thought, right?
Correct. Though for building A, I don't know that we can have that discussion
Give us what
offline.
you have.
The board doesn't need to be bored by
Right.
that.
But at some point, in terms of the overall development, one of your necessary permits is a DEP TWA permit. And at that point in time, the applicant's gotta pull the trigger on the uses and the square footages. So that sets the flow.
Okay, good night. Thank you again for
Good
coming
night.
out tonight. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
I think we got a lot done. So, any other business on the board? No? We make a motion
Would you guys
to,
Well-
discuss it at a special meeting only for what's on the agenda? Can't discuss anything
no, I
else?
know, but if anybody here had a comment or anything, we could, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
I'll second
All in favor? Opposed?
First, then
it. Mayor Carter, myself, second.
It's